Good morning, and first of all, I would like to congratulate the Hellenic Association of Energy Economists and the International Association for their initiative. As the previous opening speaker has said, there are so many challenges and so many issues happening that it is very important to debate, get knowledge from each other, and try to move forward in the more efficient way. I'm going to let's say, structure my remarks around 4 themes. The first, I will outline from the European Community perspective, why we have and how we ended up having an energy union strategy. Second, I will speak about the clean energy package, that it is a fundamental component of our Europe's COP21 strategy. Then I will move on to say how in Europe we think we should move from the 2020 objectives to the 2030 objectives. And finally, I will say a few words about Greece. I suppose this is about Hellenic economists, so even if we all speak in English, I think there are many Greeks here, and I hope they will be able to contribute to the building the future of energy transition in Greece. Now, when the Juncker Commission started in 2014-2015, the European economy was at major crossroads, and we were experiencing important challenges in the energy field. We had geopolitical instabilities with problems with our energy supplies from the East, very low investment levels who had been affected by the crisis, and we had an urgency to address climate change objectives that had been announced, but they were not being implemented. So there was a clear and urgent need to actively and collectively act at the European level and not only at national level. And what was new at the beginning of this commission is that the President and the College of Commissioners decided to take a new approach to energy policy. In the past, it was one policy looked at in isolation from other policies and was primarily dealing with market issues or with some security issues. I think the difference and what lies behind the idea of the energy union policy was to look energy policy not as a standalone, but as a part of an umbrella policy that brings and combines the objectives of energy policy with those of climate and energy policy, of digital policy, of trade, of economic policy. It is an area that needs to bring together a number of elements in order to ensure energy security and energy transition. Both of them are important for Europe. The first one, energy security, is important because Europe is an importing continent, energy importing continent, and this might change percentage-wise, but it's overall an important continent, an import continent, sorry. In a certain way, the whole effort that we are making through our energy union strategy is to ensure the stable and sustainable energy and supply of energy, but also at the end of the day to modernize the entire economy around smart systems, to modernize mobility, to have a number of areas of transitions that go well beyond the pure functioning of the energy sector. Now, as we all know, Europe is a leader in the COP21 policies and climate change policies, and we need it internationally, and we needed to make sure that we become the leader in the implementation of these energy transition objectives, and that is probably what lies behind of the big legislative package that the Commission has put forward at the end of 2016, the so-called Clean Energy for All Europeans package. We have made over the last 4 years of the 3.5 years of the Juncker Commission a number of legislative packages on gas, on energy markets, but I think the last important element by which we will have completed the legislative work around the energy union strategy is the clean energy package that basically builds the instruments and the framework through which Europe will move from the 2020 targets to the 2030 and 2050 targets. So the Clean Energy for All Europeans package is the last legislative building block to building this energy union, and it is this one that it is more actively debated at the moment between Council and Parliament, Member States and European Parliament, to make sure that we set up targets that will be achievable in terms of greenhouse gas reductions, in terms of renewables, let's say, targets for renewables production, and in terms of energy efficiency. We have been working very hard, and we want to thank the Bulgarian presidency for the active support. And I think what is important to take from take stock at this moment of time is that by the end of June, July, so before the end of the summer, we will have clarity about these strategic goals and the legislative framework in Europe going forward. There has been an active debate over the last 18 months in the Council and Parliament, but I think now we are coming very close to the moment that post-summer, all this regulatory and strategic uncertainty will have gone, and we need to move into action. This is particularly important for authorities, but also for the private sector. This is the moment that we will know if it is energy efficiency targets are 35% or 30%, if the renewables targets are 30% or a bit less or a bit more. I think what we have achieved in Europe so far is that, after almost 4 years of building different elements of the energy union, we will come to a moment that all the policymakers will establish a stable framework that will allow us to move forward. It will remove some of the uncertainty that it is inherent in the energy transition. I will not claim that it is possible to make all the right choices, and I think the energy transition is the one that will require, let's say, subsequent changes, adjustments. But I think, going forward, we will have a comprehensive and revised regulatory framework that will allow governments, investors, everybody who participates, foreign, let's say, suppliers, to know how the European energy market works. And we will stop for a while, and we will have a very good governance systems by which we will manage to see how we will adjust, let's say, our strategy if there is a need in view of technological changes or other events. Moving forward, let's say, from what we have achieved to what we need to do, I think that in terms of security of supply, we have done quite well. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Okay. In terms of security of supply, we have managed to do quite well in a short period of from when we were in 2014-15. I think we have expanded very much the number of suppliers in the gas market. We have new sources of gas. We had complete dependency in certain parts of the EU just a few years ago, and we had supply in other parts of Europe that they were not able to be used. So we have managed to expand the sources and the interconnections in the gas supply and in the electricity sector. We have built at this moment an import capacity for gas, including the projects that are being built, of 177%. It sounds a lot, but it allows, to avoid the monopoly from a fixed single supplier in Europe. So energy security has been strengthened in the gas sector through pipelines, LNG strategy, LNG terminal. It has been strengthened through a complete network of interconnections that is about to be finalized, in the next 4 or 5 years. There are projects that have been decided and they will be finalized with support from the EU. And we are actively, enlarging the projects of interconnections in the electricity market. The targets that we have set are very ambitious and in some areas are essential, but overall we are moving in the right direction, not only for the member states of the EU, but for crucial interconnected neighbor countries. The Southeastern Balkans, for example, it is very important, the type of interconnection projects that we have in our agenda and we're trying to build. So security, in our view, we have a clear strategy and it is actually very well implemented, the diversification of supplies, and probably a bit more ambition and speed is needed in the interconnection. We have research and innovation, very important component that it was said by the opening speakers. It's very important to have innovation in Europe and to keep innovation and manufacturing capacity in Europe. If you look at renewables, for example, in offshore wind or wind generators, we do have, in some cases, up to 100% of components in the supply chain manufactured in Europe. So it's not only about energy, it's about industry, it's about keeping the knowledge and manufacturing production in Europe. And I think in the offshore wind and onshore wind generation, which is an essential part of our energy strategy, we are doing very well with important outreach from Europe to India, to China, all over the world. I think where we need to do more is probably in the area of energy efficiency. This is our first source of energy security. We need to reduce energy. We are doing well in terms of intermediate targets by 2016-17 of reaching our 2020 objectives. But as I think it was said by the previous president, the transition from going from where we are today to where we need to be in 2030, 2050 is not linear. So we have been quite successful in Europe in getting onto the road to transition from 2010 for the last 6 years or so. It has not been a disappointment, the starting of the energy transition, but how you get from where we are today, from a relatively good starting point to where we are in 2030, we shouldn't make the mistake, particularly for those of you that are economists like me, that it's going to be a linear trajectory. There are, in certain areas of our objectives, much bigger challenges than they are elsewhere. So I would say that, the big challenge that we have in going forward in broad terms over the next 10 years or so in Europe is not so much on how to manage our gas supply or how to ensure further interconnections in electricity supply. There has been political acceptance and we have created an investment framework to make it happen. So there are challenges, but they are not unsurmountable, and I'm sure that we will have the political commitment to move ahead. But in some areas, in the area of energy efficiency, for example, we will need to spread this wind of change to different levels of the economy and the society. We need to reach out to the public sector. We need to reach out to local governments. We need to reach out to local level. We need to reach out to private households. The number of households and old stock of buildings. We consume, the majority of the energy that it is consumed in Europe is consumed in housing, in heating, also out of the more than 200 billion per year that Europe needs to invest in energy transition. 3/4 are around renovating the housing stock. So there are important challenges that have the advantage that they can deliver important results, important degree of independence for our continent, They have the advantage that they can engage the whole society in this energy transition and make every citizen participate as a saver of energy, as producer of energy at the local level. So they have important advantages, but they need continuous engagement by the different actors to make it happen. And they need investment support, instruments, and other things. So I would say, going forward at the EU level, a big effort has to be made to streamline all the successes that we had through Energy Union in establishing energy transition objectives down to the local level, to the citizen level. And this requires a lot of effort, more effort in my view, personal view, than deciding on a single big project that has other types of challenges. Now, we have this commission. I talked a lot about the Juncker Commission. I'm sure you have noticed that yesterday the European Commission made its proposals for the EU budget for the period after 2020, 2027. I will not go into the details, but I'll just highlight that also through our proposals for EU budget and the instruments for EU budget, we can see that Europe puts its money where where its mouth is. So we have increased in our proposals. We have doubled the resources. We propose to double. We have proposed to double because the member states and the heads of states will decide. But we have proposed to double the resources that go into the Connecting Europe facility. We have doubled the resources that will go into research and facilitation of energy efficiency and renewable strategies through the LIFE program. We have increased the mainstreaming, the target of structural funds that will be allocated to energy transition policies from 20% to 25% of the structural funds have to be serve the objectives of energy transition. We have increased from 20% to 40% the investments that they will be made under the successor of the Juncker plan, the Invest EU facility into climate change and energy transition objectives. So we need a substantial effort, let's say, by the public sector, but we do need a substantial effort also by the private sector in this area, and we need substantial investment at all levels. Just a few words on Greece. As we are here in Greece, in Athens, I think at an important moment by which we all in Europe and as Greeks, at least for those of us that we are Greeks, we do hope that the country gets permanently out of the crisis environment, and we do hope that the country will be able to start building on its own a bright future. I think it's very close and within reach. This summer is going to be the big turning point. Energy has been an important component of the structural reform, let's say, side of the program for Greece. There has been important achievements, but there are also things that remain to be done. And therefore, it is important in this area that there is a continuity. I think the government, the opposition, all the political parties are, in our view, and from what we perceive, very aware of the need that energy is an important component of, for the future of Greece, both for the survival of the country, but also as a positive factor that will allow Greece to play an important role in the Balkans and in Europe. I think we have a good starting point in Greece. I mean, renewable energy has started. I know that things are not perfect, but I have been to countries in the Union who have, they are at 2%, or 3% of renewable energy penetration, and we do have a framework on which we can build in Greece. I think we have awareness about the issues, and a lot of things have been done in the framework of the program. I think we need to be consistent going forward to ensuring that the opening of the electricity market continues. It has started, but continues. I think it's the fact that new companies have come into the electricity market for abroad. Some of them will speak later today. It's very important to bring knowledge, to link with the European markets. I think we need, of course, to ensure the financial sustainability of the main producer, PPC, because it is still the main supplier of electricity in Europe, and there are several policies that need to be followed to make sure that you do have not only competition, but also healthy competition around financially healthy companies. We need to finally, we are one of the last countries to implement the target model in the electricity markets. We need to be confident that the electricity market model will also work for Greece and for Southeastern Europe, and not always be isolated in the way we deal with electricity markets. And last but not least, we need and we have huge potential to deal with energy efficiency in Greece. We have about 3 million buildings that were built between 1955 and 1995. And there are buildings that need substantial renovation, substantial improvements. They consume a substantial part of our energy resources in Greece. We need to, along all our urban landscape, to engage mayors and regional authorities around street lighting projects, energy production projects. We need energy renovation projects, and we need to make sure that in post-crisis environments, our companies, small and large, invest in energy efficiency for the economic benefits that it brings. So I think there are important challenges going ahead. There is a good starting point. It's a fantastic topic to engage with at all levels of government. Myself, I'm fairly new in this area of energy. I am more a banker and a finance person. So over the last 3 years, there is a lot of passion of all of this dealing with energy markets, and I think it's an important issue that will allow Europe and Greece to go forward and build a bright future in a different energy environment. Thank you very much, and I wish you the best for this two-day conference. Thank you.